This is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. In this episode, we're going to be covering why almost everything everyone thinks they know about coronavirus is almost certainly wrong, specifically when it comes to the numbers. So we're going to be taking a look at a number of different websites today, some of which people think are definitive. The first one is the famous Johns Hopkins University website, which tracks the total cases supposedly confirmed of COVID-19. Now, if you'll look here, the total figure as of today is 685,000 plus. But as we look over to China, we see that the cases are only some 82,000. Now, this drastically reduced after China decided to throw out Western media. But if we move over here and we look at the total recovered, which everyone keeps pointing to, if you look at China's figures, somehow they have recovered over 90% of their total cases. This absolutely cannot be possible unless they are completely lying about their numbers or if they have some cure that no one else knows about yet. Look at the total number of cases in the United States, then look at the figures that have been recovered so far. Look at Italy, look at Spain, look at Germany. No one has recovery figures anywhere even remotely close to what China claims they have. Now, various authority figures with the NIH and CDC have claimed that these numbers are correct. They go along with the WHO, which is almost entirely controlled by Communist China, which I warned you about a few episodes ago, as you will hopefully recall. If not, you should go back to that episode and find out just how infiltrated the United States is by the Communist Chinese. Despite that, they claim that these figures are somehow reliable. Forgive me for not trusting these numbers at all. Most recently, we have seen Robert Barnes numerous times on Twitter pointing out how the numbers from Italy also cannot possibly be true. And the YouTuber known as Mr. Reagan has just produced a video that came out a couple of hours ago that I just watched, which pointed out also that Italy's numbers cannot possibly be accurate. And I will put a link to that information below so that you can check it out. We also see a huge variation in terms of the total death figures for Italy versus China and any other place around the world, with a mortality rate somewhere around 10%. However, if we look at Germany, Germany has a less than 1% mortality rate. Iran, oddly enough, has the second highest figure of total recovered by percentage at almost 33%. I think that the most reliable numbers that we have here are the United States numbers due to a variety of reasons and reporting reasons and testing reasons. These figures will continue to climb, and they're most likely the most accurate figures in the entire world. Now I'm going to move on from this website, and we're going to take a look at a few others. Next, we're looking at an article from the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA. This was published on March 23rd, 2020. I will link the article below so that you can check it out on your own. The title is Case Fatality Rate and Characteristics of Patients Dying in Relation to COVID-19 in Italy. In this article, we find out that there are multiple problems with the reporting overall and also the recording of information related to the comorbidities of the patients who end up dying, where all of those aspects are pushed to the side and the deaths are simply attributed to COVID-19. Next, we're going to take a look at a timeline put out by Axios, The Early Days of China's Coronavirus Outbreak and Cover-Up by Bethany Allen Ebrahimian, March 18, 2020. One of the things that I've been most interested in from the beginning is the fact that we heard almost nothing in the Western world about the Wuhan virus or Chinese virus or COVID-19, whatever you wish to call it, until right after the trade agreement had been signed between the United States and China. My view on this is that China was covering it up almost entirely during this process, and then after that, information was basically undeniable. This is also why China later threw out the Western media so that they could go again into a deep cover-up mode. I think they have also been silencing a number of dissidents, possibly hauling them off to concentration camps like they do the Uyghurs, or outright executing people. There are a number of reports lately that have shown that over 21 million cell phones in China have gone silent completely. The thought is on that somehow these people were eliminated or disappeared. One of the most interesting things we see here as we scroll down is that on January 14th, the WHO, which is almost entirely controlled by Communist China, says Chinese authorities have seen, quote, no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus, when, of course, they knew and hundreds of other people knew this was an out-and-out lie. On January 15th, this is the date that the trade agreement was signed. We also see here the patient who becomes the first confirmed U.S. case leaves Wuhan and arrives in the U.S. carrying the coronavirus. This is indeed patient 0 who transmitted it into the nursing home in the state of Washington. Here on January 18, we see the annual Wuhan Lunar New Year banquet takes place where tens of thousands of people gathered for potluck dinners. This is where much of the virus spread like wildfire. Then 6 days after the signing of the trade agreement, we have January 21st, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control confirms the first case in the U.S., and the Chinese Communist Party's flagship newspaper, People's Daily, finally mentions the coronavirus epidemic and Xi's actions to fight it for the first time. On January 23rd, Wuhan and 3 other cities are put on lockdown. This is the largest lockdown in human history. Right around this time, approximately 5 million people leave the city without being screened for the illness. Now, do you honestly think that these people didn't travel throughout the rest of China, that they only went to other parts around the world? You're a fool if you believe that. Then we have January 24 to 30. China celebrates the Lunar New Year holiday. Hundreds of millions of people are in transit around the country as they visit relatives. Now, if the transmissivity rate is as high as they say, then this should be ubiquitous in China rather than isolated to less than 85,000 confirmed cases so far. This proves China is lying beyond a shadow of a doubt. And now here, as it says at the bottom line, China is now trying to create a narrative that it is an example of how to handle this crisis when in fact its early actions led to the virus spreading around the globe. Not only that, but the mainstream left-wing Democratic complex media in the United States is also saying that everyone in the world needs to look to China as to how to handle this. This, of course, is Mr. Reagans' video on YouTube. I will have this link below so that you can check it out to gather his information that he points out about how he demonstrates Italy is lying about the coronavirus death numbers. If this video indeed survives, there's a possibility that YouTube will take it down by the time I have my video up. And one of the most notable things about this has been the variety of reports that we have, a variety of different moods that we have towards this whole COVID situation. The mainstream media, of course, tends to do what it always does. It amplifies everything. It says the sky is falling. Everybody needs to freak out and panic. And we have a wide range of reactions that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But first here, we're going to take a look at this article from The Hill. What if the sky is falling coronavirus models are wrong? This is from March 28th. And as we move down a few paragraphs into this, we see here it says, quote, in an article in the Los Angeles Times, Nobel laureate and Stanford biophysicist Michael Lewitt throws a hope-inducing bucket of cold water on the non-stop alarmism being repeated by some in the media and in public office. Levitt says unnecessary panic has been created by focusing on the relentless increase in the cumulative number of cases and spotlighting celebrities who contract the virus, and I don't care about these celebrities at all. Quote, what we need is to control the panic. We're going to be fine. And the cumulative number, of course, will go up because most people have either no symptoms at all or very mild symptoms, and lots of people are being tested now. The United States is going to lead the entire world in testing very rapidly. It's been predicted that soon the United States will be able to test as many as 5 million per day with certain of the testing systems that are coming up. And, of course, the numbers will skyrocket there, but that does not mean that all of these people are going to be hospitalized or dying. And, again, it's all relative because no one knows the numbers from China. The numbers in China could be in the hundreds of millions, and no one will ever know. And not least of which because China seems to have very faulty equipment. Let's take a look at this next article. So here we'll take a look at the Yahoo News article, China supplied faulty coronavirus test kits to Spain and Czech Republic. And it's very likely that China has also been using these same faulty test kits. The majority of rapid test coronavirus kits supplied to China supply by China to Spain and the Czech Republic are faulty, local news reports reported. Up to 80% of the 150,000 portable quick coronavirus test kits China delivered to the Czech Republic earlier this month are faulty. So for all of those articles from the left-wing predictable mainstream media that were praising China for trying to, quote, help out the rest of the world with a problem that China actually created in the first place, whether it came from a biolab or from one of these wet open-air markets, China is revealed to be a deceptive agent indeed. Incredibly nefarious are they. It says here the country's health ministry paid $546,000 for 100,000 of these test kits, while the Interior Ministry paid for the other 50,000, and of course they are garbage. And even at the bottom of this article, we see here it being touted coronavirus deaths worldwide exceed those inside China. We do not know this is the case at all. This is reported as if it were definitive fact, and no one actually knows that to be the case. Here we have another article. Spain returns faulty test kits to China as COVID-19 death toll passes 4,000 mark. It says here the Chinese embassy in Madrid said on Thursday that the Spanish government had bought a batch of faulty COVID-19 testing kits, but this is not simply a batch. These are hundreds of thousands of faulty test kits. And indeed, later down in the article, it says here that it could be millions of testing kits, and these must be considered unreliable because it says here there's an accuracy level of under 30%. Do you want your life counted on less than a 30% chance of accuracy? I would say no. Here is yet another article confirming the same thing from Business Insider. Spain, Europe's worst-hit country after Italy, says coronavirus tests it bought from China are failing to detect positive cases. And then we see the typical mainstream media spin here as we scroll down to the bottom. It says, as the outbreak has slowed in China, again, I've already demonstrated to you that that cannot possibly be the case. That has to be a lie unless they have a vaccine that no one knows about or a cure that no one knows about. It says here, which has frequently reported no new daily domestic cases, garbage. The country has sent medical workers and donated medical equipment such as masks and tests to other countries. Well, they've donated things that don't work at all, and they're sending workers because they have so many people they can easily do so. They're not actually helping the rest of the world. This is a mainstream media lie because China owns much of our mainstream media and they own almost all of Hollywood. Here we have an article in National Review talking about exactly the point that I'm making. China is pushing a zero myth on COVID-19. It says here, and correctly, and I usually do not go to the National Review, by the way, the regime's censorship and distortions are a threat to global public health as well as a violation of human rights. Correct. Chinese President Xi Jinping has a new slogan, Zero, the goal of reducing to zero the number of cases of the Wuhan coronavirus, aka COVID-19. Reaching zero is crucial to achieving his broader goal of global leadership and domination. This is exactly what I've been pointing out about China for some time now. They are the global threat, and they will use any means whatsoever to become the so-called global leader. And of course, the leftists in the United States will rapidly crown them as leaders of the world, and that goes for the Europeans as well. We move down here to a section later in this article, neutralizing independent media. Of course, these outlets are not particularly independent at all. They're actually on the side of China. But it says here China has expelled reporters for the Washington Post, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal. But the reason why is they don't want any of them getting any funny ideas of actually trying to report any of the truth about what's going on. It says sources it cannot control, but of course they are ideologically massively aligned with the Communist Chinese. But still, they don't want to have anyone there with a pang of actual conscience breaking through. The regime has clamped down increasingly on independent journalists as its domestic practices have become increasingly inhumane, especially with respect to its repression of religious minorities, including Uyghur Muslims, who have been subjected to mass internment. In any other time, we would call these not internments, as in internment camps like in America during World War II. These would be concentration camps or gulags. And always remember that the Chinese Communist line is frequently promoted by those in charge of Twitter and the WHO. The WHO is treated as if it is authoritative when it is just another mouthpiece for the Chinese Communist Party. We come down here to the concluding paragraph. In the past, the Chinese Communist Party's restrictions on the free flow of information seem to Americans and others in democratic countries to be a matter mainly concerning the freedom of the Chinese people, important as a matter of upholding the universal right to freedom of expression. But the regime's distortions of the truth are now more than abstract problems for the international community. They are threats to global public health, indeed, matters of life and death. And there's a lot more that I could cover here, but I'm actually running out of time, so I'm going to move on quickly to show some of the range of reactions that we've had in the conspiracy community. Now, I've pointed out before on this show that I am a connoisseur of conspiracy theories. I enjoy reading them, reading about them, and following how they react to various things that take place. If you go to rense.com, which is typically a news aggregator, you see a lot of the more hysterical types of reactions from the conspiracy community, that this is some kind of a New World Order takeover and that life is never going to return to normal, so on and so forth. You see some of that also on Jason Burmis's page. He's had a number of absolute complete meltdowns since this whole thing began. Some of it I would say is warranted, especially considering where he lives, his proximity to what actually will be a very badly damaged place from all of this. But for those of us who are in more rural and suburban communities in the South, where I live, this is not going to have remotely the impact here that he will experience up there. So I understand that impacts his decision-making. And he has some interesting videos here that you can watch about what is called Event 201, led by Bill Gates. For those who don't know, Bill Gates is an advocate of population control measures, as was his father. Go and do some research into Bill Gates and his family, and you'll find out all of these associations with the Club of Rome type groups and population control, people who advocate putting chemicals in the water or in the air to sterilize the population, and so on and so forth. So if you think he's some kind of a big helper in all of this, as I've seen Mike Cernovich tweet out multiple times, Bill Gates is not at all to be trusted. And some of the most over-the-top things that I've seen were from Natural News with Mike Adams, talking about millions of people dead in the United States from COVID. I don't think that's actually going to happen. Now, some would say, well, we can attribute it to bending the curve, that's actually working, that people are engaging in self-isolation and quarantine and washing their hands appropriately and all of that, and that's actually changing previous outcomes, which is a good thing. But then here you still do see, all this concern about the Pentagon or the military being involved or the National Guard or whatever else. But nonetheless, there are some interesting articles here for you to go and check out. I'll link this below as well. And quickly here before I wrap up, this is a very disturbing piece from the GatewayPundit. Chinese company that makes forehead thermometers jokes about making faulty product for sale in the U.S. in order to spread the disease. So here you have communist Chinese intentionally desiring to spread it all throughout the United States, making it impossible for us to rely even on forehead thermometers. So they sell faulty equipment into Europe, and then this person advocates it here. I'll link this article below as well. And the final thing that I want to look at is Tucker Carlson's monologue from the other night. New York's leaders more worried at first about being called racist than coronavirus threat. And then you go down and you see where he cites absolute complete irresponsibility from the New York City Health Commissioner, of all things, where they said to the public, the risk to New Yorkers for coronavirus is low and our preparedness as a city is very high. There is no reason not to take the subway, where of course it has spread like wildfire, not to take the bus. All these public transit things are just incubators for spreading disease, by the way. Not to go out to your favorite restaurant, and certainly not to miss the parade next Sunday. I'm going to be there. Will these people ever be held accountable for what they have caused? Probably not. Very unfortunately for the thousands upon thousands who are going to die in New York City. And the same thing goes for Italy, where Italy was showing these videos saying to hug Chinese migrant workers who were coming back from places affected by the disease, basically spreading the disease all over even worse. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.